Okay, I think we can start. So, hello, everyone. My name is John Degen. I'm the chair of the International Authors Forum and executive director of the Writers Union of Canada. Those are the two banners behind me there. I'm very, very pleased to welcome you to this discussion about the artist resale right around the world. This is the second in a series of talks stemming from the IAF's recent Creating a Living report, which you can find on the International Authors Forum website. Let me remind you that this talk is being recorded and streamed live on Facebook as well. If you intend to tweet about this event, and you're certainly encouraged to do so, please use the hashtags Artist Resale Right or ARR or IAF. I want to start by acknowledging that my home in Canada is in Takaranto, which is a Mohawk word translating to where the trees meet the water or the gathering place. Takaranto is bound by Dish with One Spoon, a treaty between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee to share the territory, promote peace, and protect the land. I acknowledge them and any other nations who care for the land, recorded and unrecorded, and I pay my respects to Canada's first storytellers and artists. I'm very, very grateful to have a home here. So it's my understanding that around the world, close to 95 countries recognize some form of the artist's resale right, which I can briefly describe as a legal mechanism allowing for visual artists to share in the secondary market for their work. Let me explain that. Since the visual art market is most often about the art object itself and not about permitted copies, like in my world of the literary arts, the original creator loses their connection to the work itself after the initial sale. And yet it is often after that initial sale that the value of visual art grows as the reputation and career of the artist grows. But with no legal connection to the work after that initial sale, the creator cannot share in the growth of that value. In steps the artist resale right, which, as I envision it, maintains the connection between work and artist and provides a percentage of the secondary sale price going back to the creator. How have I done so far, panel, on explaining the concept? Thumbs up, okay, thank you. It's especially important, as I see it, to open the secondary market up to artists from communities traditionally underserved by the primary market. So in Canada, for instance, Inuk artist Kanuyuk Ashevik is often considered the best argument for an artist resale right. Her world-famous stone-cut print, The Enchanted Owl, was initially sold in 1960 for $24, and it helped to jumpstart global interest in Inuit art. The Enchanted Owl was later resold for $58,650, which is almost 2,500 times the original price. And because Canada still does not have a working artist resale right, Ashevik did not benefit financially from that dramatic increase in value. Indigenous artists in Canada, often working in isolated northern communities under severe economic strain, are shut out from the secondary market for their work, and it is in that secondary market that most of the financial value in their work is realized. Now, thanks to wonderful advocacy work by Canadian visual arts organizations like CARFAC, two separate committees of our parliament have recommended that Canada implement a resale right, or at least consider doing so. Now, of course, the Canadian Parliament considers a lot of things related to copyright and artist livelihood, and there can be a lot of waiting involved. So we in Canada continue to maintain pressure on our lawmakers to bring in this important right for artists. That's a bit of the Canadian perspective on this topic. All that said, as primarily a representative for literary concerns, the artist resale right is not my area of expertise. I deal much more with the public lending right, which is a similar mechanism in many countries used to compensate literary artists when their work is collected and used in public libraries. So today I'll be acting mainly as host and moderator for this discussion, and the real heavy lifters here are our illustrious panel of experts in the visual arts. So let me jump right to introductions. I will introduce everybody quickly, and then we'll move to opening statements and discussion. So from Sweden, we have Sofie Grettve von Rosen. Sofie, an expert in European Union law, is currently managing the resale right work at the Swedish Collecting Society. Prior to that work, Sofie was a lawyer for the Swedish Artists Association. Welcome, Sofie. From the UK, we have Reema Selhi, Reema is Legal and Policy Manager at the Design and Artist Copyright Society, known as DACS, the flagship visual rights management organization in the UK, where she lobbies on behalf of visual artists to champion their contribution to the UK's creative industries. She was instrumental in launching DACS' campaign Fair Share for Artists, and she regularly speaks on sustainable policies for artists in the UK and also at international forums such as the World Intellectual Property Organization. So welcome, Reema. From Uganda, we have Edward Waddimba. Edward is a self-taught versatile artist. His work spreads across a varied range of genres, from drawing, painting, and collage to multimedia sculpture and craft making. Edward is a cultural entrepreneur and is also currently the president of Uganda Visual Artists and Designers Association. Welcome, Edward. Jumping back to the UK, we have Blees, Luxemburg. Ruth's practice as an artist and photographer concerns the representation of the city and the phenomenon of the urban. Her art ranges from large-scale photographic works, public art installations, and operatic mise en scène. She has recently completed a major public artwork for the facade of Westminster City Hall called the Silver Forest. Ruth is a reader in urban aesthetics at the Royal College of Art and is founder and co-director of an experimental art production space. So welcome, Ruth. And finally, from Brooklyn, New York in the USA, we have Janet Hicks. Janet is Vice President and Director of Licensing at Artists' Rights Society, or ARS, the US collective management organization for managing the intellectual property rights of visual artists. She is also the ARS representative for the International Federation of Reproductive Rights Organizations, or IFRO. She has an MA in art history and is also a curator and advocate for emerging contemporary and outsider artists at her own gallery, 1 Mile Gallery in Kingston, New York. So welcome, Janet. Okay, so let's go in this order. We'll have Reema go first and start us off, and then you can sort of decide your own order, or I'll call your name out. So let's start with Reema.
So I want to talk today about an aspect of the artist resale right, which is very dear to me, which is how it benefits artists themselves, artists' heirs, and really the context in which artists live in, that the royalty is so essential to what they do. So when the UK adopted the artist resale right back in 2006, the UK was firmly a part of the European Union. So the law that the UK has is very similar to other European countries because it originated from this EU directive. So my colleagues, I'm sure, are going to discuss a little bit more about the kind of nature of the EU law. But what I want to share is the reason why we started the campaign Fair Share for Artists. There was a genuine concern that the UK would rethink having artist resale right when the UK voted to leave the EU and do Brexit. So that's the reason why DACS wanted to start this campaign, to demonstrate the importance of artist resale right and to safeguard it in UK law. And it was a successful campaign because the UK has now committed to keeping artist resale right into UK law by virtue of the EU and UK trade deal, so the Brexit agreement. But what the campaign really highlighted to me in particular was some very interesting points about artist resale right that I want to share. So the context of artist resale right is really important. In the UK, despite being a country with a really wealthy creative industries, we've got a creative economy that's worth over £100 billion to the UK economy every year. Artists actually earn shockingly low amounts of money. A study in 2016 showed that the average earning for a visual artist from their work was only about £5,000, which is incredibly low. And COVID in particular has had a really strong impact on artists. We surveyed our members last summer and almost 3/4 of them said that they were immediately affected by the impact of the pandemic. So what I mean by this is that they lost commissions or sales, or that they could no longer use their studio space or work. So how does artist resale right help? Well, for a start, DACS has now distributed over £95 million in royalties to artists and their heirs since the artist resale right came into law in 2006. So that's 15 years of giving, it's a huge achievement, 15 years of paying artists directly money straight into their pockets. For many artists, even modest payments are extremely valuable to help them cover the costs associated with being an artist. So payments do vary in terms of value, but in terms of the monthly distribution that DACS makes to artists for artist resale right royalties, in February, the median payment was £129 for the month. So that means artists who are earning a really low amount of money and who have been impacted severely by the pandemic are getting this extra support from the royalties from artist resale right. So this is what I like to call the virtuous circle, because ultimately artist resale right royalties get invested back into the creative economy. So when we surveyed our artists on what they use their royalty payments for, they overwhelmingly told us that they invest money back into their work. 3/4 of the artists that we surveyed use artist resale right royalties for buying art materials, and 65% spent it on studio rent. Because artist resale right also benefits artists' heirs, so artist resale right is applicable for the whole length of copyright in an artwork, so 70 years after an artist dies, the benefit to heirs and estates of artists is actually incredibly valuable. Heirs and estates often carry out really time-consuming work, which is quite costly, tasks which are needed to preserve the artist's legacy, such as archiving, storage, insurance, and restoration. And a lot of the artist estates have told us that they help museums and galleries to display deceased artists' works, but they don't actually get paid for doing that themselves. So the artist resale right royalties are really essential to allow them to continue doing this really important work and effectively give public access to artworks. So here I just wanted to share some quotes from artists that took part in our campaign. And what I think is quite nice about this, and what was very nice about speaking to artists, was that we really got to understand how vital ARR was to them in ways that actually go beyond remuneration. A lot of artists that we spoke to said that the process of being informed about where their works are being sold or when gives them a lot more transparency in a very opaque art market. I like this quote here from Jeremy Deller as well, because effectively a lot of art market professionals were very against the introduction of artist resale right, because they were scared that it would effectively end the art world, as Jeremy has said here. But we've seen a lot of proof that actually there's no impact on the art market. And in fact, the UK has risen to being the second largest art market in the world in 2019, eclipsing China, which shows that artist resale right obviously doesn't actually stunt the growth of the art market. So finally, before I pass over to my colleagues, I just want to cover what I think we need now. So COVID has shown us that we're living in a really increasingly digital world. Collectors and buyers who are initially a bit wary of online sales are now snapping up multi-million-dollar artworks from the comfort of their own home. So it becomes clear that geographical barriers are being broken down a little bit. What this means for ARR is that artists will only really get paid if the country where their works are being sold has an artist resale right law in place. So in the online marketplace, the notion of location and jurisdiction is actually becoming a lot more obscure and harder to work out. We need to level the playing field for all artists, and we need to bring in an international treaty on artist resale right. Artists shouldn't be prejudiced by their location or their nationality to be able to earn a royalty. And my final point is that we need a joined up and harmonized approach to make sure that the art market professionals who are obliged to pay for artist resale right are doing so. So that's what makes a successful artist resale right economy is when all the art market professionals are actually paying the royalties that are due to the artists. So just to leave you on the final slide, which is the slogan from our campaign, there's no art world without artists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reema, and congratulations. 95 million pounds over 15 years is an astonishing accomplishment. So well done. I just want to remind everyone who is watching, who's registered here, that you can ask questions of the panel in the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen. We'll monitor that, and we'll get to a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So over to Sofie in Sweden.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here. My name is Sofie, Grettve from Rosen, and I'm delighted to be part of this panel for this very important issue. Not only because I've been working with this issue and thus seeing the benefits of to artists for this particular royalty, but also from my time at the Swedish Artists Association. I know firsthand how hard it is to make a living from an artist, and often you have incomes from all sorts of fields. We sometimes talk about a patchwork, a blanket of income sources. And in that situation, I know the value of a non-transferable and collectively managed and non-waivable right, as that makes a real difference to people's livelihood. And I think it's a democratic issue as well. Like, unless we give artists a chance to make a living of the work, we're not going to have art from everybody. We're just going to have art from those people who can support themselves through other means, and that's not the world I want to live in. But coming to Sweden, I think it was really interesting that Reema spoke before me, because hearing your speech, that your law, your resale right that originates from the directive, I think it's interesting to compare that to Sweden, where we've had a resale right since 1996. We had to make some amendments when the directive was introduced into Swedish law, but it's a slightly different situation, and thus I'm coming into this discussion from a slightly different angle. I was thinking that I should talk a little bit about not just the artist resale right as a piece of legislation, but the implementation. And I have a presentation that I will try to share with you. The presentation will start off with the year 2018. And the reason for that is that's when we had some amendments into the Swedish copyright law, making the administration of the resale right so much more efficient. Let me see if I can share the right screen here now with you without my points. The title of my presentation was then Artist Resale Right in Sweden since 2018. And the reason for that being that in 2018, we had an amendment. Well, actually, we had an amendment into the Swedish copyright law, allowing us to demand reports from art dealers and from auction houses in a much more efficient way. Just briefly though, the current situation in Sweden, just to give you an idea, we have a fairly low minimum price, meaning that resales above around 230 euros, they entitle artists for resale right. We have a fairly closed market. I dare to say that I know most of the big dealers and the auction houses. Maybe that's a difference to other countries. And another point that I will come back to later on is that we do have very good relationship with the platforms that report resale right. So that's some background information. However, back to the 2018 date and what happened then. Before 2018, we had resale right in Sweden since 1996. All very happy about that, but we still had trouble implementing the legislation, partly because the wording in our legislation was that for us to be able to demand a report from art dealers and auction houses, a report that would enable us to invoice them for resale right to pay to the artist, we had to show that a sale had taken place. Now, obviously, it was quite difficult to show that a sale had taken place unless you had access to the books, a report. So we had this catch-22 situation, which had been difficult for many, many years. And what happened in 2018 was that we are entitled to basically ask for a report from anybody engaged in the sale of art or in an art market professional. And if they haven't sold anything, they have to provide us with a zero report. And if we haven't contacted them at all, they have to provide a report anyway by the 1st of April, the year after a sale has taken place. And now you might ask, what's the point of that? What's the point of having all these zero reports? Well, the point was that when I started working with the resale right here at the Swedish Collecting Society, Bildupphovsrätt, all of a sudden we had a much better register, a much better view of who were engaged in the sale of art. We could start a dialogue with these art dealers. And I think that was really important for many reasons. Again, connecting to what Reema said, we had the possibility not just to say this is what you should do, but also say why. These are royalties that allow for the creation of more work. These are royalties that put the artists, authors of visual art, unique works of art, they put them in the same place as, for example, authors of books. We could explain using the French word, the raison d'être behind the resale right. And I think that was really, really important to show that we are artist resale right. That's not in opposition to the art market. That's something that makes the art market thrive. And yes, of course, people want to keep the profits for themselves, but I think it was, I don't have any quotes in my presentation, but I did speak to someone just a week ago, someone who said to me, you know what, when we first had the dialogue about artist resale right, I thought this is dumb. I'm not going to sell any living artist's artwork anymore. I'm just going to go into antique, free work that's not covered by artist resale right. And then, you know what happened? It didn't change a thing. Like the market just absorbed this little, it's a tiny royalty. It's not a big percentage of the sale if you compare to other selling commissions or buyers commissions. There are many other fees that are far greater than the artist resale right. So that was kind of a nice quote to have. An art dealer who had been opposed to our initiatives, opposed to this reporting, stricter reporting, he's actually admitted now 3 years on that this is good, this is fine, no, it doesn't affect me. Anyway, so I move on. I thought it would be interesting to let you know the results of these amendments, again, to make the point of the resale rights administration, why it's important to have an effective administration of it. We had a huge increase in resale right reported after the introduction of this amendment. Now the numbers are in Swedish crowns, which might make them seem even greater than they are, but say around from about 11 million Swedish crowns to 18 million Swedish crowns. That was a big increase. Now, obviously, part of that increase was because we got this contact with the art dealers and auction houses, and we demanded reports as far as 3 or 4 years back. But it was a great thing. And we still have some challenges. I shouldn't just praise the system. We still have some challenges. If people don't report resale right in Sweden, there's no sanction as such. We can name and shame people, but still those who do well, they have a good conscience as a kind of price for the behavior. And then we have some issues with private sales. Artist resale right is due not only when a professional art dealer sells a piece of work, but it's also due when an intermediary is involved in the sale between two private people. And those two get hold of those transactions, to understand those transactions, it's still quite hard. And then I mentioned the 12,500 euro cap. I'm not sure how aware you are of these kind of technical bits, but it's coming back to the point of where and how artist resale right was introduced in Sweden. In Sweden, it was introduced before the directive, and unfortunately, there are some points in the directive that has reduced the scope of resale right. We are paying out to artists now, and one of those is this cap. However, I don't want to put too much negative focus on that, because I think that the benefits of going together, the benefits of harmonizing this, the provisions for this royalty, which is so important, far outweighs any disadvantages. And that was my short presentation on the administration of resale right in Sweden. I am here to answer any questions for you later on if you want to.
Thank you so much, Sofie. A reminder again that people can ask questions of the panelists in the Q&A box below, and I note that someone has already asked a question, so that's great. So we move from 2 countries with established artist resale rights to a country trying to establish an artist resale right. Let's talk to Edward Waddimba in Uganda. Edward?
Yes, John, thank you. Yes. My name is Waddimba Edward from Uganda. I'm the president of Uganda Visual Artists and Designers Association, and also chairperson, East African Visual Arts Council. Among other things, I'm a cultural entrepreneur. Let me start by saying that every artwork made for an artist is like a child. And as an artist, I endeavor to put everything that I know culturally into this artwork, with the hope that this artwork will travel beyond where I can go. It can speak the language of my culture and my country better than I can. Where I cannot speak, it can speak for me. And better still, with the hope that it can secure my today, future, and it can really secure my economy now, and also protect my future if well guarded. But given the economic circumstances of most of us, especially here in Uganda, and the way the market is run, we are forced to give away the dream of protecting our art, just peanuts of money to the would-be collectors in courts, because when you read about what is a collector, then most of the people here who take our art, they're just mere imposters as collectors, because I think a collector is supposed to look out for almost all the interests of the artist or the author of the work, which does not usually happen. This forces artists not to have a reunion or any track of their work where they are going. Because when you try to really be very, very, very particular on how your work is going, how you're going to sell your work, because most of us know what is really needed, but the market does not say so. So you're forced to follow into the other market, the other stand on how things are run, and not following the right channels. I have been in this industry for more than 20 years. I've seen artists big and small. Some are still living, some have passed on. I've interacted with their families, but the situation is very, 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 very alarming, because you see now, when you try to follow auction houses, follow sales of artworks now on the day-to-day, you see that some of the works from Uganda are really making money. But even without the knowledge of the artist is really, you just get a call from a friend, maybe from wherever, in Sweden or Germany or somewhere, that is here in an auction without you even knowing. And it is really a very sad thing. But on a positive, if my work sells now at maybe $10,000 and I sold it at $1,000, maybe the next collector will look for me in a very different way. And that is the best benefit artists are getting right now. The mention of your name in a very big art sale. What do we need to do? As artists, we are engaging government to really help us formalize our art deals by making a CMO for visual art in Uganda, because we're really very aware that Uganda is party to the Berne Convention, and in our constitution, the artist resale rights are recognized under the Copyright Act of Uganda, but there is no reciprocal agreements made between other countries that where our art is marketed. That puts us at a very, very, very big disadvantage on how to track our work with the absence of a CMO. And again, when Uganda passed the copyright law, it did not set up a copyright board. Even the CMOs that are in Uganda, the one for books, the one for performing arts, and one for film, they're also struggling in enforcing some of these laws. The copycats are all over, and there's nothing much they can do with the absence of a copyright board that can really help in enforcement of these laws. And also, some regulators here say that the creative industry is disorganized, but we say that we are disorganized by some people who intentionally want to disorganize us. Recently, we formulated the National Culture Forum, where all culture domains, all the people in the culture and creative industry fall. We formulated the Culture Forum, and we're trying to get the industry, to show the government that the industry is really together so that we can move forward with some of these issues that are disturbing us. And people are cheating us in the name of us being disorganized. Some of the things that are really holding artists to become formal and look of disorganized is like the registration of artworks when it comes to intellectual property and copyright laws. It's very expensive to register an artwork here in Uganda. The cost of registering an artwork and gazetting it in a national gazette is over $15 per piece, which is somewhat expensive for an artist, especially visual artist, whereby every day can produce 2 or 3 works. If I'm to spend $15 every day to register an artwork, that is a lot of money, and it is holding lots of people behind. And also lack of sensitization, or people being aware of what their right is. Being a third world country, organizing people into one space or one volume or one database is really difficult. Under the National Culture Forum, we are also trying to embark on that, to try to get artists in one big space, in one big space or database, whereby we can discuss and agree on things and lobby government on so many different things. And finally, I've talked about capacity building and reciprocal, having reciprocal agreements in with different countries where Uganda sells, which are potential markets for Uganda and Ugandan art. And also, Oh yes, I think Reema talked about this. There's a need for the international bodies to come together, the bodies like WIPO, ARIPO, CESAC, and the rest, to set up a level ground for art. Some of us from the third world countries feel left out when you set a bar. Like I was reading somewhere that work to receive artist resale rights has to be over $3,000. This is something that is really high and puts most of the artists from Africa at a disadvantage. We need to lower this to encourage young artists also to benefit from these, and also help them set up a record of their work. Yeah, I think for now, John, are you there? Can't hear.
Yep. Thank you so much, Edward. You really illustrated that problem that we've been talking about, which is the lack of connection between the artist and the work, especially when the work leaves the country. That's a real argument for an international instrument that Reema was talking about. Yes. Let's have another, and it was great to have a perspective from a working artist as well. And let's have another one of those perspectives. We'll go to Ruth, please, Luxemburg in London, I believe.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, John. And I'm an artist, and I also am an educator. I teach at the Royal College of Art, and we all agree that art and artists are vital. So I've put together 3 reasons which I want to briefly explain to you. Art creates knowledge. 2, the fragile ecology of the art community, the global art community. And 3, value of relationships. Now, art creates knowledge because artists develop ideas that take us forward to the future. An artwork is not just an object, an aesthetic object, but it also embodies knowledge. And this knowledge continues to ratchet and become relevant to new generations. To recognize the knowledge within an artwork that is embedded within it, we don't think about a scientific knowledge, but a relational knowledge. Now, different people relate to this knowledge. Different generations need to be allowed to relate to that knowledge. The artwork is almost like a prototype. Now, the creator needs to be honored, needs to be financially honored for sharing this knowledge. And the secondary transaction is the moment when this honoring can happen. The fragility of the global art community is also an important argument for AR. The continuous well-being of the complex ecology of the art world relies on the artist. As we all know, the artist is the most vulnerable link in that configuration. They are the producers, but in terms of financial resources and recompense, they are the most vulnerable. Now, ARR, as we heard, goes to address this. We all want this vibrant, creative art community, but for that, we need to invest to sustain it. Now, I also want to talk briefly about relationships and investment. ARR alerts the artist, as Jeremy Della has pointed out, that their work is valued and sought after. The ARR transaction, I would argue, also strengthens a potential bond between the creator and the collector. Now, this bond is something that cannot be put into money, and yet it also assures the provenance of the artworks. It gives the artwork another type of reassurance and credibility. And this bond, as I said, goes beyond monetary value. However, monetary value also comes into it because ARR is a fundamental investment into the future of an artist, of a culture, and their continuous ability to be creative, to make artworks. And this investment allows for the artworks to hold, but also to increase its value. So from a financial perspective of the investment logic, ARR makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had never thought of that, strengthening the connection point that you've made and assuring the provenance of the artwork. That was an excellent point. So we'll move finally, last but not least, to Brooklyn, New York, and Janet Hicks. Janet?
Thanks, John. First of all, thanks to the entire International Authors Forum and my colleagues here for giving us a platform to talk about this subject. I'm especially grateful for all the work IAF has done in the past to expand the rights of artists, not only collective rights, but artist resale rights, et cetera. It's an honor to be here and to help that cause. I'm especially grateful to be on this panel because Edward and I are really the odd men out on this. The US likely has one of the largest art markets on the planet, and we don't have a resale right. So this presentation, which I'm queuing up now, will not give you all of those beautiful figures that we've seen from Sofie or from Reema on how artists have been benefited by the resale right, but I'll talk more about how artists have been affected in this economic turmoil and some other figures about how auction houses are still doing quite well. Also, where we are in the US on trying to get our resale bill put into action. So we'll start with auction houses. As everyone knows now from the presentation, resale royalty is a small percentage that goes back to artists on the secondary sale. It's typically under 5%, but if you compare that with what auction houses who are selling on a secondary market get, their commission fees start at 14.5 and go up from there. And I should note that these commission rates, I have Christie's here, have gone up at least 4 times since 2016. So an example here, an extreme example, of course, is that a $29 million Picasso sale in New York last year at Christie's made over $7 million on that. And of course, the artist, the estate in this case, made none. I know that we see some other cases, possibly with Reema's figures too, where we don't need to talk about getting $7 million to artists on a sale. We're talking about getting maybe $1,000, $3,000 to an artist. And that's a really important payout to artists, big and small, living and estates. In 2020, obviously a pandemic year, Sotheby's still managed to make $5 billion and Christie's reported total sales of $4.4 billion. This is a reduction from 2019, of course, it's a pandemic year, but they still managed to make hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, and artists truly suffered in this period. These figures I have from actually a March 2021 report from Americans for the Arts. I submitted this to the IAF, so I think that, well, not only is this slide going to be available later, but there's more information on a one sheet from the Americans for the Arts that I think people will find really valuable about their studies on how artists were impacted during COVID. Let me move this a little bit. Can't see my whole screen. Artists and creatives were severely affected. 63% became fully unemployed. 95% report a loss of income. 79% experienced a decrease in creative work. And you'll note 62% is a drastic decrease. They're unable to buy the supplies and resources necessary for creative work. This is that cycle that Reema was talking about. If they're not able to purchase supplies, they're not able to create artwork, and that whole ecosystem is destroyed. And as Sofie mentioned before, we want all artists to be able to contribute into this ecosystem. Of course, a lot of artists don't have a safety net in these times, and the big concerns are really basic ones. Food, housing, forgivable business loans. This is an absolute crisis for artists. And of course, this inequity between artists and auction houses and other industries have been around for quite a long time, but the pandemic has really amplified this position. And so I'm going now to what we are doing in the US to get a resale right. I'll start it with a little bit of history. We've been involved, Artist Rights Society has been involved in pushing forward a bill for equity for visual artists for over a decade. We started with our sponsor in the House of Representatives, Jerry Nadler, in 2011, putting forth an Equity for Visual Artists Act. We were very ambitious. We had a high percentage of 7% on any sales over 10%, over 10,000. That has changed over the years. But we like to think that we were really instrumental in getting the US Copyright Office to look at it again. 2013, they published a report encouraging Congress to consider legislative active to address this historic imbalance. And from 2015 to 2021, we've put into play our new bill, the American Royalties II Act, which we've introduced in the House over the years, over 2015 to 2021. And our current situation is such. In 2021, we plan on reintroducing the Art Act. The 2021 bill is at 5% of royalties with a cap at $50,000 for any sale, which means that no artist is going to make more than $50,000. So if the work sells for $20 million, the artist will still make the cap at $50,000. Jerry Nadler is still our sponsor on this. We're seeking Republican co-sponsors. But the big news of 2021 is we have a new political landscape here in the US. We have a new president and reorganizations of the House and Congress subcommittees. So while Jerry Nadler has been a staunch advocate for our bill and a huge supporter, it's been difficult over the last 4 years to find Republican co-sponsorship for this bill. It's a very partisan world out there. Even though copyright tends to not be a partisan subject, it seems to be something that both sides can agree upon, but getting the Republican co-sponsor has proven to be difficult in the past, but we have confidence with the new reorganization of the House and some of the subcommittees that we'll be able to do that this year. We also have a new US Register of Copyright, Chair Perlmutter, who you might recognize from WIPO, and she will actually get the bill discussed with her, briefed with her at the oversight hearing next month. So we're looking to get those co-sponsors in place, both Republican and additional Democratic co-sponsors, so we could see an easy passing, hopefully sometime this year or next. But we have renewed confidence in this new landscape that we'll finally get this bill across the finish line. And that's my update.
Thank you so much, Janet. That's incredibly important work being done in the legislatures in the United States. And speaking advocate to advocate, I'm very jealous that you get to name your own legislation when you're lobbying. We don't. It's not a common practice here in Canada. Our laws come numbered, like C11 or something, C51 or whatever. Yeah, the Art Act. The Art Act sounds so wonderful. Yeah. So we have a number of questions. I want to make sure if there's any discussion between panelists, just let me know if you have questions for each other. But let me jump first because Edward, there was a question for you directly. And it was, how can Ugandan artists support the association to encourage government to implement the copyright law? I think this is a very important question. I wanted you to address it verbally because we hear this same thing all the time. We do a lot of work as leaders of organizations, but how can the artists themselves encourage your government to do the right thing here?
Thanks, John. I think the way the Ugandan government works, the thing is all about numbers. Artists should come and join the association, should come and register with the association. You know, it's funny here, you look at a very, very, I don't know how to call it, maybe taxi drivers, the small, big group of people who are not in a formal way of setting, like the lack of a better word, what can I call them? Okay, like taxi drivers, there are so many, or motorbike drivers, there are so many. and it is very easy for them to lobby from the president directly. Yet for us, like from the creative industry, it has taken us like 5 years to set up a meeting with the president. He had given us a date in March, then COVID took it away. So we have to go again on the waiting list. But if artists can come back home and register with the association, to associate is one big thing that we really need right now. Because even if we went to WIPO or anywhere, CISA, they'll ask you how many members you have. There are so many practicing artists in Uganda, but everyone is there. They are working on their own. So they need to work. There's a need for us to come together and have one common voice. It is easy to work on policies. There are policies that are being worked on, but when you don't tag them with a big number, so things can go south. Another thing I was trying to tell, I think it was attending, it is artists don't want to go formal in their practice. They don't want to register their studios. They don't want to register their companies. They work in a very informal way. Let's go formal, try to register, however expensive it is. We are trying to lobby with the government, at least to let them allow us to register art styles instead of artworks. Yeah, because if I register style, at least it covers most of my work, other than just registering each artwork that I make. Yeah, I think those are the small steps we are trying to take. And also, I call upon the Ugandan artists to join the workshops, because we had some few workshops with the WIPO and under the Uganda Registrations Bureau. But when you put out the invitation, a few artists turn up, but we are trying our level best to sensitize them, to reach out to them. Maybe we're also being so centered in the capital city. We are trying to find ways of going up country and meeting those artists. There's big talent in Uganda. You should come and see people here. Actually, the art of East Africa is all in Uganda. I'm the chairman of East Africa. I'm talking with authority. Most of the art, and even if we check on the record of the Kenya art auction with Circle Art, most of the works that are really making landmark in the auction in Kenya are from Uganda. So there is
Edward, I would love to come and see it. Next time I can actually get to an airport legally, we'll talk.
You come.
So I just conscious of time. I just want to make sure if any panelist has a question for any other panelists, let's do that, and otherwise we can jump again to the Q&A. Is there anything? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody jumping. So this question has come up a couple of times. I know we had it, one form of it from one of our members, Fuis, in Italy, before we even started. And here we have it from Maria Fernanda in Mexico. Hello, Maria Fernanda. My question, in Mexico, the law establishes the right to remuneration for resale only when the sale is made at public auction or in a commercial art gallery. Then there's a lot of art sales between particulars that the artist doesn't know about and so does not receive anything. How could this situation be avoided? It sounds like this has come up in Sweden and maybe elsewhere where the ARR is established. So I know that you've Sofie, you've responded in the chat, but would you mind responding directly?
I can respond, and I will look at you this way then.
Great.
Well, I think it's a really, really interesting issue, because we do have a kind of wording now that doesn't define an art market professional in certain ways. We provide a negative definition, which basically means that anybody who's not a private individual, if I as a private individual will sell to you, that sale, resale will not be covered by resale right provisions. But if I'm a company, if I'm an entity, no matter if I normally sell cars or maybe I'm an insurance company, if I as a professional entity sell artwork, I'm considered an art market professional when it comes to resale rights. So we've kind of got around those demarcation problems, the definitions of what is an art market professional. However, I think I'm, answered in the chat as well. That doesn't allow for us to collect all resale rights that we are due, that the artists are due. We still have this problem of policing. We still have a problem of needing to put resources on chasing those people engaged in these kind of dealings. I think that they are the most difficult cases when you have two private dealers doing a closed, transaction. If we demand books, when we have managed to secure resale right from those kind of transactions, often it is because the artist has known either the seller or the buyer. And once we go and speak to the art dealers, we can basically threaten with demanding their books and say, well, has this taken place or not? We think it's taken place. If they say no, and we know for sure, we can go and demand to see their books. But it is a really tricky issue. And I think it comes down to, you can have all the legal provisions in the world. You can be right in terms of what the law says, but that doesn't always give you the right. I hope that will answer the question.
Absolutely. Reema, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on that because, Sofie, I think you make a really great point. And it's really great to see that in your country, the law is defined in a way that it is negative. So it's actually has a lot of clarity to it. So I think that's a really great example. The UK law has some areas about it where I think if it was being drafted from scratch, they just wouldn't have some of the clauses in there that they currently have, or maybe it would be changed, because the definition around what makes an art market professional, so someone who participates in the art market, is not clear-cut enough that it doesn't create room for opportunity for people to say, this doesn't address the kind of work that I'm doing, even though someone might actually be participating in the art market as an agent, as an introducer, as an online seller. So I think really kind of the key is getting the legislation right. And any country that is looking to introduce a resale right law, I think it does help to have kind of a best practice framework set up and be able to share knowledge from different countries about, well, this has worked in our country, this has actually been problematic. Maybe there's a concept of agency and national legislation that might kind of create a problem in how the artist resale right law works with national law. So I think there's a lot of kind of fine detail that needs to be taken into account to really get it right and make it completely watertight.
Yeah, can I add comment on that? I think that's
absolutely. Yeah.
When I first started working with this, I thought some of the entities I contacted or got reports from, they were, for example, local auction houses that mainly dealt with cars, but also estates. So if someone fairly wealthy with no heirs passed away, it's fairly common for local auction houses to come and do, they do a local auction of a house. And if you have valuable pieces of artwork there, it's very, it's relieving not to have to go into discussion whether an estate auctioneer is an art dealer or not. They selling art, so they should pay resale, right? I'm grateful for that clarity. So to enhance your point.
Thank you so much. I'm going to steal a bit more time because there's a point in all of this that I think is extremely important. So for the countries that are struggling to have this established, Canada and the United States and Uganda, we've heard from the countries who already have it established a little bit about the resistance to the artist resale right when it was being established. And I wonder if you could just speak to how fears about, I think Reema, you were saying that it would hurt the art market somehow, how those turned out to be incorrect. Because I mean, this is something, when you're dealing with copyright and artist rights, you hear all the time, copyright is going to break the internet, or, it's going to ruin this market or that market. To us, obviously, these are ridiculous claims because we're not in this to damage our own market. We're in this to make conditions better for the artist. So could you speak to that a little bit, Reema?
Yes, of course. I think Janet's slides were really stark and telling on this, that the auction houses are charging such a high percentage. You know, there really is a discrepancy between the percentage of fees that the auction houses are charging in comparison to resale rights. So in a way, it's kind of, the question is, well, how can it be possible that something which is such a low percentage of a sale can have such a devastating effect on a market, when we know that obviously the auction houses themselves kind of, you know, do quite well out of the sales of the works. But in terms of the evidence, there has actually been a lot of good evidence that's come out in the last couple of years. There was the economic study that was commissioned at WIPO. I do forget the name of the study, but certainly that could be circulated if people haven't seen it, that found that there really was no evidence of a detrimental impact on the art market. And I think the cleanest way to look at this is, has the market failed since the introduction of ARR? And it hasn't. Every year we collect more and more royalties, which shows that there are more and more sales. And we've had bumper years where the art market in the UK has, you know, been popping champagne bottles at the end of each summer sale. And it really shows that ARR is just a small little percentage. It really is a fly in the ointment. There's no way that it can have the devastating effects on the art market that people are saying it does.
It's so important to get that international perspective for us in the countries where we're working hard to establish it. Janet, is this something that you're running up against, you and Jerry Nadler there?
Yeah, I think to Reema's point, we've successfully argued that the percentage is so small that it shouldn't be considered an issue. I do think in the past, a lot of people have viewed this feeling like a tax or feeling like a burden, and that friction would somehow disrupt the market. But we've successfully shown through statistics that Reema or others have provided that, yeah, it doesn't really affect the market. And again, the percentage is so small that this is just something that should, easily be achieved.
Yeah, I've always been confused by the argument that somehow compensating everybody, all the players in the market, is somehow damaging to the market. So I'm very glad to hear that the numbers don't bear that out at all. This has been just a fascinating conversation. I have learned so much from this panel. Thank you all so much. I think we're out of time. And I just want to remind everyone that we've recorded this session, and it will be made available eventually, fairly soon, I believe, on the International Authors Forum site. So I'm going to say thank you individually, Edward, Janet, Ruth, Reema, and Sofie. Thank you so much for your expertise and your time today. And thank you to everyone who joined us, both registering and on Facebook Live. So we'll say goodbye now.